When the mist rolls low over the Irish countryside and the grass whispers beneath ancient stones, something stirs. Not in the air, not in the earth, but in the blood. Hidden within the cells of those who call this land home is a mystery that predates even the oldest ruins. A sequence of code that doesn't just trace family trees, it echoes across epochs. What if the true history of Ireland was never fully written in parchment or stone, but encrypted in DNA? For centuries, we've studied Ireland through its legends, its wars, its poetry. We've spoken of kings, saints, invaders. But beneath the shifting banners and empires lies a deeper, uninterrupted lineage, one carried not by flags, but by chromosomes. What if Irish DNA is the last untouched manuscript of prehistoric Europe? This isn't just romanticism, it's science. Studies from Trinity College and Cambridge have shown that the Irish form a genetic cluster more distinct than almost any other in Europe. Despite countless migrations and invasions, their genome has remained uniquely Irish. And that raises a provocative question. How? How did a people surrounded by centuries of upheaval preserve something so ancient, so pure? Consider this. The people of Ireland today share significant genetic overlap with their prehistoric ancestors from over 4,000 years ago. That's not just unusual. It's almost impossible in most of Europe, where migrations have blended and overwritten identities time and time again. Yet in Ireland, something resisted, something endured. That endurance is not just historical, it's genetic. Embedded deep within the Irish genome are patterns scientists can't quite explain. Traces that don't match with known ancient populations. Echoes of people who disappeared without leaving a name. Why does Ireland harbor DNA sequences with no clear relatives anywhere else in the ancient world? And yet, this uniqueness isn't isolation. It's intersection. Because alongside these ancient whispers, Irish DNA carries subtle traces from far beyond its shores, threads from Scandinavia, Iberia, even the Eastern Mediterranean. The question isn't just who the Irish are, it's who walked this land before them and what their genes still remember. These aren't idle curiosities. They're shifting the foundations of what we thought we knew, not just about Ireland, but about all of us. Because if Irish DNA has preserved the voice of forgotten peoples, it might just be the missing chapter in the story of Europe itself. So, we begin not with kings or maps or swords, but with a whisper, a silent archive of blood and bone, one that waited thousands of years for the tools to finally read it. Across Europe, centuries of conquest, colonization, and collapse have blurred the boundaries between once distinct peoples. Empires rose and fell, borders shifted like tides, and bloodlines became layered mosaics. But on the western edge of the continent, surrounded by cold sea and sky, one island held fast to something almost unthinkable in modern genetics, purity of ancestry across millennia. Ireland isn't just genetically unique, it's genetically defiant. When modern scientists fed Irish genomes into the world's most powerful sequencing algorithms, they didn't expect what came back. The Irish didn't blend seamlessly into Europe's genetic fabric. They emerged as an outlier. A population so distinct, so statistically separate, that even neighboring Scotland couldn't fully account for the difference. This wasn't cultural difference. It wasn't linguistic evolution. This was something deeper, molecular, ancestral. A code that resisted dilution. While most of Europe reflects centuries of continental mixing, the Irish genome holds onto its ancient architecture with fierce integrity. Trinity College Dublin's landmark studies revealed clusters in Irish DNA so regionally specific that they could distinguish people from Cork and Kerry with startling accuracy, not just by surname, but by subtle genetic signals echoing for hundreds of years. Imagine a code so precise. It tells you not just that you're Irish, but which hill your ancestors stood on during the Bronze Age. But that's just the surface. Even more shocking was how little the core of Irish DNA had changed since the Neolithic period. While England and mainland Europe show significant shifts due to later invasions and migrations, Ireland's DNA has remained comparatively untouched. The arrival of Vikings, Normans, and even British colonists didn't overwrite the genetic script, they barely smudged it. What makes this more extraordinary is that Ireland was never fully isolated. Ships arrived. Wars raged. Foreign blood did mix in. But the core genome of the Irish people stood like a monolith in a storm, absorbing without erasing, enduring without surrender. This has led scientists to call Ireland a genetic time capsule, a preserved fragment of Europe's ancient population structure. It's not that Ireland lacks history. It's that its DNA remembers history the way stone remembers fire, with marks etched deep, but structure unbroken. And yet, the puzzle deepens. While uniquely Irish in its structure, parts of the genome whisper of other places, far older, far stranger. Fragments aligning not just with British Isles ancestry, but with ancient Basque lineages. Echoes, perhaps, of an Atlantic corridor long forgotten. Could Ireland be a relic of a prehistoric migration route lost to rising seas and fading memory? These findings challenge everything we thought we knew, not just about Ireland, but about how identity survives. In a world where heritage is often rewritten by force, here is a people whose DNA has quietly resisted for over 4,000 years, preserving an origin story older than the written word. Ireland doesn't fit the European genetic pattern, because it isn't just European in the conventional sense. It is something else, something older, something enduring, a mystery that has outlived kings and empires, still pulsing in the veins of the living. Long before the stories of Celtic warriors and sacred groves, before the chants of Gaelic priests echoed through stone halls, there were footsteps, quiet, barefoot, cautious. Across a wild and untouched Ireland walked the first humans, shadows swallowed by time, yet somehow still speaking through fragments of their bones and strands of their DNA. We don't know their names. We don't know their words. But we know they came, over 10,000 years ago, as the last great glaciers melted into the sea. Hunters, gatherers, survivors, and in the marrow of their remains, found buried near rivers and caves, scientists have traced the first chapter of Ireland's genetic story. Their DNA shows no signs of boats or empires. It tells of small, scattered tribes moving with the seasons, carrying tools carved from stone and stories now lost to silence. But then a sudden shift. Around 4000 BC, something changes. New people arrive, not just in Ireland, but all across the Atlantic edge of Europe. They bring seeds, pottery, animals, and a sense of permanence. These were Neolithic farmers, and with them came the skills to transform a wild island into a landscape of cultivation, and the vision to raise structures that would defy time itself. Monuments like Newgrange, older than Stonehenge, older even than the pyramids of Giza, rise from the earth, aligned with the stars, glowing with ritual purpose. But here's the astonishing part. When geneticists extracted DNA from skeletons buried beneath those stones, they found not simple local tribes, but links to distant shores. Genetic signatures from the Mediterranean, from Iberia, from regions we now call modern Spain and Sardinia. These ancient Irish were not isolated islanders. They were part of a great migration wave that swept the Atlantic coasts, possibly by sea, long before recorded history even began. And with that revelation, another myth begins to unravel. For decades, it was believed the Celts arrived in Ireland as conquerors, warriors crossing from Central Europe, leaving their language and blood behind. But the truth in the bones says otherwise. The so-called Celtic influence came slowly, gradually, like water shaping stone. Culture moved faster than genes, and Ireland remained genetically anchored even as its myths evolved. What this tells us is profound. The foundation of Irish identity didn't begin with Celtic drums or Druidic chants. It began in the deep past, with people whose faces we'll never see, but whose DNA still flows in millions of Irish hearts. And yet, the picture grows even stranger. In the burial chamber of a 5,000-year-old Irish king, scientists found signs of extreme inbreeding, a level normally reserved for ancient Egyptian royalty. What kind of society was this that placed such cosmic power in bloodlines? Was Ireland once ruled by divine dynasties, whose memory lingers only in whispered legends of gods and heroes? We may never fully understand the world those early settlers built, but their genome, their biological fingerprint, survived every storm, every sword, every silence. While their names crumbled into myth, their legacy endured in the cells of generations. For centuries, we were told the Celts came like a storm, warriors from the east, sweeping into Ireland with bronze swords and fire, reshaping the island's destiny. Their language, their art, their mythology, all became synonymous with Irishness. But what if the truth is not a story of invasion, but of quiet transformation? Modern genetics has turned the old Celtic tale on its head, because when scientists looked for a sharp genetic shift, evidence of a new people replacing the old, they found no such line. Instead, they discovered continuity. Long, unbroken lines of ancestry stretching from the Neolithic farmers to the so-called Celtic era. If these invaders truly came, they left no genetic crater. So how then did Ireland become Celtic? The answer is more subtle, more powerful. Celtic culture seems to have flowed into Ireland the way music spreads through silence, slowly, invisibly, reshaping identity without rewriting blood. Trade routes, marriages, shared rituals. Over time, the customs changed, but the people remained. Imagine a society where cultural adoption wasn't a byproduct of conquest, but a choice, where communities embraced new gods, new languages, and new artistic styles, not because they were forced to, but because they resonated. This wasn't erasure. It was evolution. The ancient Irish didn't vanish beneath Celtic banners. They absorbed them, and in doing so, they created something entirely their own, a hybrid identity, born not from invasion, but from adaptation. But here lies the deeper mystery. If Celtic identity wasn't built by blood, why does it feel so deeply rooted? Why does the sound of ancient Gaelic feel like something inherited rather than adopted? Could it be that these cultural elements didn't arrive from elsewhere, but instead echoed from within? That what we call Celtic today may be a resurfacing of something far older, rekindled through connection rather than conquest. This theory gains ground when we examine Ireland's early mythological cycles, tales of warrior queens, magical floods, and divine tribes like the Tuatha Dé Danann. Stories once dismissed as fantasy are now being reread alongside genetic data and archaeological finds, and the line between myth and memory begins to blur. Perhaps the Celts didn't shape Ireland. Perhaps Ireland redefined what it meant to be Celtic. What's clear is this: identity is not always forged in fire. Sometimes it rises like mist, imperceptible at first, until suddenly it's all around you. The so-called Celtic transformation was less a battle and more a blooming, one rooted not in conquest, but in cultural osmosis and the enduring strength of the island's ancient soul. They came from the sea, brutal, unannounced, and relentless. Longships gliding through morning fog, their prows carved like beasts, cutting into Ireland's tranquil shores. To the monks of Armagh and the villagers of Wexford, they were destroyers. But to history, and to DNA, they became something else entirely. Threads in the Irish tapestry. The Norse didn't just raid Ireland. They settled it. They built cities where none existed before: Dublin, Waterford, Limerick, places that today pulse with Irish identity, but began as Viking footholds. But conquest, it seems, was only the first act. As the centuries turned, those once feared warriors began to vanish into the very land they once plundered, not in death, but in marriage, in children, in shared blood. The evidence lies not in sagas or ruins, but in the cells of modern Irish descendants. Scandinavian genetic markers appear subtly, like faint brushstrokes on a much older canvas. What's remarkable isn't that the Vikings left traces. It's that those traces didn't overwhelm the genome. Even in regions closest to Old Norse settlements, the core Irish genetic structure remains intact. The DNA tells us that assimilation happened, but on Ireland's terms. Centuries later, another storm came ashore, quieter, but calculated. The Normans, armored in French ambition and led by knights of English lords, carved castles across the land and rewrote the power structures of Irish kingdoms. But their blades, too, dulled in the island's resistance. Despite their influence over law and language, the Norman genetic imprint in Ireland remains faint. Their legacy is visible in family names, in stone architecture, in echoes of feudal lines, but not in the deep current of DNA. Ireland accepted what it needed and let the rest dissolve. This pattern tells us something profound. Ireland was never a blank slate. It was never conquered in spirit. Invaders came and stayed, yes, but they were absorbed into a matrix far older, far more cohesive, than any single dynasty could displace. Even traits often linked to Norse or Norman origin, lighter hair shades, specific haplogroup clusters, exist like footnotes, not rewrites. They add color, texture, but not direction. The genome, the heart of the people, continued to beat in the same ancient rhythm. The science doesn't contradict the legends, it reframes them. The invaders didn't erase the Irish. They became them. And this process wasn't passive. It was deliberate. Generation by generation, the Irish identity proved too strong to fracture. It didn't resist influence, it redefined it. Where others left scars, Ireland wove memory. So, when you walk the streets of Cork or hear Norse echoes and place names along the eastern coast, know this. The invaders may have written chapters of Irish history, but they never held the pen for long. The genome reveals the truth. The island listened. It adapted. And then, as always, it endured. There are places in the world where history hides in ruins, in dusty manuscripts, in silent fields. But in Ireland, history breathes through the living, in freckles kissed by northern light, in a flicker of copper hair, in eyes the color of stormy coastlines. These are not accidents of beauty. They are genetic footprints, marks left by time, climate, and survival. Science has traced the thread of red hair to a specific mutation, the MC1R gene, a simple twist in the double helix. Yet in Ireland, this twist became a signature. Nowhere else in the world do so many carry it. Why here? Why this island? The answer lies in light, or the lack of it. Ireland's skies are famously overcast, its winters long, its summers brief. In a land where sunlight is fleeting, skin needed to adapt. Paleness, far from weakness, became evolution's answer, an efficient way to draw in every rare drop of UV light, to convert it into vitamin D, to survive. But red hair is just the beginning. The Irish also show one of the highest rates of a far less visible trait, hereditary hemochromatosis, known ominously as the Celtic curse. It causes the body to absorb excessive iron, building slowly, invisibly, until damage is done. And yet, centuries ago, this condition may have been a silent blessing. In an age when diets were sparse and iron was scarce, those who could store more had a better chance of surviving famine and disease. What is a curse now may once have been a lifeline. This is what makes Irish genetics so fascinating. Every trait is a story, and every story walks the tightrope between danger and survival. Then there's cystic fibrosis, a rare condition, but one that occurs in Ireland more than nearly anywhere else. Scientists still debate why this pattern exists, but one theory suggests that carriers of the gene may have had an edge against past epidemics. In the genetic record, nothing is black and white. Every mutation is a trade, every adaptation a compromise. Even freckles, scattered across the skin like constellations, are not mere decoration. They tell of ancestors who lived under gray skies, whose melanin danced to the rhythm of cloud and wind. They are ancient weather maps printed on the body. But perhaps most extraordinary is this. Despite modern mobility, despite centuries of migration and movement, these traits persist. Generation after generation, the same patterns reemerge, not diluted, but defiantly intact. It's as if the land itself remembers, as if the genes that formed in its soil still echo through those who call it home. And this is not just about what can be seen. It's about what is felt, the resilience etched into bone, the vulnerability hidden behind strength, the quiet endurance of a people who have survived cold, hunger, and foreign rule, not just with swords, but with cells. In Ireland, the body is an archive, the skin a manuscript, the blood a living text written in a language older than words. In every genetic story, there are names. There are dates, regions, known ancestors, identifiable migrations. But what happens when a signature appears in the DNA that belongs to no one we've ever recorded? No civilization, no kingdom, no map? Buried in the Irish genome are whispers of a people for whom there are no myths, no chronicles, no gravestones. Scientists call them ghost populations, ancient contributors whose blood flows in modern veins, yet who vanished without a trace. Their DNA patterns do not match the Celts, the Vikings, the Neolithic farmers, or any known European group. They're not figments of imagination. They are biological reality, and they defy every category we've come to rely on. These aren't just fragments. They're entire strands of ancestry, threads with no matching source, no archaeological companion, no cultural relic. Who were they? Did they cross a forgotten land bridge before the seas swallowed the coasts? Were they the first true Irish? Or were they outsiders, seafarers, survivors of a lost migration, who vanished into the bogs and hills long before history took note? Some of these ghost signals bear resemblance to ancient Basque-like groups. Others hint at a lineage older than the known Indo-European wave, a genetic dialect from the Stone Age, still alive in modern Irish blood. If true, this means Ireland carries traces of one of Europe's most ancient genomes, surviving beneath every layer that came after. But even stranger is what this tells us about memory. Human memory is fragile. We forget within generations. We rewrite the past with every new king, every new war. But the body remembers. Even when the stories are lost, the cells still carry their echo. The genome is not limited by language or record. It preserves what we no longer know how to tell. And this memory doesn't lie neatly in expected places. In remote burial sites, chambered tombs carved deep into Ireland's hills, scientists found skeletons bearing combinations of genes never seen elsewhere in Europe. Some were linked to far-off lands. Others seemed entirely unique. A few even suggested that elite bloodlines, the kind associated with kingship or ritual, may have been guarded so fiercely that they bred only within a tightly enclosed group, preserving genetic signatures, now extinct everywhere else. Could this be the origin of Ireland's ancient tales of semi-divine rulers? The Tuatha Dé Danann, said to descend from the skies, were they mythologized memories of a genetically distinct class that eventually disappeared into the folds of ordinary ancestry? We don't know, but their DNA remains. It is in the forests of Ulster, in the bones beneath the Bann, in the blood of a child born today in County Clare, who will never know the names of the ones who made them. Ghost populations are not fantasy. They are proof that our history is far less complete than we pretend. They are the spaces between the lines, the faces in the fog. And in Ireland, they are more present than almost anywhere else. There are stories that shimmer at the edges of memory, tales of gods with glowing skin, immortal tribes who vanished into hills, warriors who sailed from faraway lands guided only by starlight. For generations, these were whispered at hearths, carved into stone crosses, sung into existence by poets who never signed their names. But what if they were more than myth? Ireland's ancient legends, the Leber Gabála Érenn, the Book of Invasions, speak of successive waves of mysterious peoples arriving on the island. Among them, the Milesians, the Nemedians, the Fir Bolg, and most ethereal of all, the Tuatha Dé Danann. Shining ones, masters of art, war, and knowledge, said to have come from the skies and vanished into the earth when defeated. For centuries, scholars treated them as fiction. Today, genetics is forcing a reevaluation, because within the blood of modern Irish people lie fragments of ancestry that can't be explained by known historical migrations alone. Ghost signals, ancient lineages, unexplained markers that align, astonishingly, with the timelines echoed in these so-called mythical invasions. The past is leaving fingerprints that resemble the architecture of folklore. One theory suggests that these stories are not imagination, but distorted oral records of real population events, passed from mouth to mouth, until time melted the facts into fables. When geneticists uncovered Iberian and Mediterranean links in Neolithic Irish remains, it raised a provocative question. Were the legends of the Milesians, said to come from the land of the sun, actually encoded memories of real seafaring migrants from the southern coasts? And the Tuatha Dé Danann? Could they represent a once-isolated elite group whose genetic distinction was so profound that it made them seem otherworldly? Ancient DNA from high-status tombs reveals signs of genetic singularity, possibly families who intermarried over generations to protect bloodlines thought sacred. The legends say they disappeared underground. The science says their DNA did not. It merged, slowly, silently, and now lives on in people who may not believe the stories anymore, but carry them anyway. Even the structure of Gaelic clans aligns with genomic evidence. Y-chromosome studies show distinct paternal lineages, tracing back to figures once thought purely legendary, like Neil of the Nine Hostages. More than 3 million men worldwide may carry his marker. Is it coincidence, or proof that oral history was sharper than we ever gave it credit for? DNA doesn't preserve poetry. But sometimes it reflects its rhythm. In the folds of our chromosomes, we may find that the most unbelievable stories were never meant to be taken literally, but never meant to be forgotten either. Because culture isn't just carved in stone or written in verse, sometimes it's embedded in bone. From the streets of Boston to the hills of Otago, from Canadian coasts to Argentine valleys, the Irish are everywhere. Not just in name, not just in accent or tradition, but in blood. Over 70 million people around the world claim Irish ancestry, yet most of them have never set foot on the island. Still, something calls them back, and often it begins with a test. A small vial of saliva, a waiting period, and then a revelation. Through commercial DNA kits, millions are uncovering roots they never knew existed, connections to counties, clans, even specific surnames that vanished generations ago. For many, this isn't just science, it's restoration. A shattered heritage stitched back together, one nucleotide at a time. But what makes the Irish diaspora different isn't just its scale, it's the emotional gravity it carries. Centuries of exile, famine, forced migration, and colonization didn't erase Irish identity. They scattered it. And in that scattering, a strange kind of resilience was born. Families that lost language held on to song. Those who forgot their village remembered its rhythm. And now, the genome is becoming a map back home. Irish DNA, once confined to a rugged island, now lives on 5 continents, carried in laughter and stories, in the cells of strangers who suddenly feel familiar. Some discover that they're linked to ancient dynasties. Others trace roots to coastal villages obliterated by the Great Hunger. A surname once meaningless becomes a key. A genetic marker reveals a forgotten migration path. And suddenly, Ireland becomes not just a destination, but a mirror. Projects like the Irish DNA Atlas are now using these connections to refine our understanding of regional genetic patterns. Scientists are able to pinpoint where a person's ancestors lived, not just in Ireland, but where within Ireland. Galway, Donegal, Tipperary. Entire genetic microclusters map out like ghost towns reborn through code. And it's not just about the past. These connections are building communities, online forums, heritage societies, pilgrimages where people meet cousins they never knew they had. For many in the diaspora, DNA has become a new form of kinship, stronger than paperwork or faded photographs. But beneath the science lies something even deeper, a hunger for belonging. Because identity, once scattered by empire and ocean, has now found a way to return, not in ships or letters, but in the silence between genes. In a chemical signature that says, "You are not lost. You are part of something older than memory." Most ancient stories are locked in ruins. Some are buried beneath ash or sealed in forgotten scrolls. But Irish DNA? It lives. It breathes. And today, it's not just telling us where we came from. It's shaping where we're going. For scientists, Irish genetics is more than a historical artifact. It's a biological time machine, a record of millennia preserved in a population whose geographic and cultural continuity is unlike almost anywhere else in the Western world. While empires expanded and blended, Ireland, rugged, storm-battered, and defiantly rooted, became an accidental sanctuary for unbroken genetic lines. That stability has turned Ireland into a goldmine for modern medicine. When researchers study the Irish genome, they don't just learn about Ireland. They learn about all of us. Conditions like cystic fibrosis, which occur at unusually high rates in Irish populations, have helped unlock pathways for treatment far beyond the island. By examining concentrated mutations in this unique gene pool, scientists have identified the underlying causes of diseases that affect millions globally. Hereditary hemochromatosis, once misunderstood, even ignored, was mapped with greater clarity because of Irish DNA. What was once dismissed as a regional oddity has become a global case study in how genetic conditions evolve from adaptation to liability. But this isn't just about rare illnesses. The relatively unmixed genome found in rural Irish regions offers a cleaner window into how genes behave without excessive interference from centuries of population mixing. It allows scientists to isolate variables, to understand the mechanics of genetic inheritance, and to better model everything from autoimmune disorders to psychiatric conditions. In this way, the Irish genome becomes a kind of reference text, a linguistic root form in the Dictionary of Human Biology. Projects like the Irish DNA Atlas and the All-Island Cancer Research Institute are turning these genetic insights into real-world breakthroughs. Tailored medicine, predictive diagnostics, even AI-assisted therapies, all of them using patterns found in Ireland to benefit lives worldwide. And yet, the most powerful revelation is not technical. It's human, because every discovery made from Irish DNA carries with it a legacy of endurance through famine, through colonization, through centuries of forced migration. It carries the echo of ancestors who survived not just with swords or wit, but through the quiet resilience of biology. Ireland's gift to the world is not just cultural, it's genomic. A quiet island whose blood remembers, whose cells still sing the song of Europe's forgotten origins, and whose genetic echoes now help heal strangers oceans away.